Hey everyone, and welcome to another G News podcast. Today we're going to just get to know who we are on G News. And we've got another special guest who's a G Newser and has actually been following G News since 2014. I'm sure everyone is probably at some stage or another read a couple of comments by Marjorie MacLean. Marjorie, I'd just like to really welcome you to this podcast.
Thank you, G, and it's so lovely to talk to you. I've been following you for so long, and I can't tell you how important your posts are at keeping up the spirits and actually really shedding light on the facts. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. Marjorie, we're all busting to know a bit more about you. So could you enlighten the audience here at G News a little bit about what part of New Zealand do you come from? And where do you hail from?
Oh, thanks, Gerard. I was born into a very large family in the East Cape, and born in the maternity home, which is, I think, now a private house at Waipiro Bay. And I consider myself an East Coaster. It's an amazing place to live. And my parents were farming out the back of Tapuya Springs towards Mount Hikurangi. So Hikurangi is my maunga and Waiapu is my awa. So I feel really privileged to have been born there, a very beautiful part of the country. And yeah, we lived quite a long way from basically any community, although farming communities, were very close knit. My father he'd been in the Second World War. His family had farmed just down the road at Tahua near Tapuya Springs, and his mother, who had come out from Scotland to marry a soldier who she'd met over in the First World War, they had a little farm, and she had to school her own children, and she was a brilliant woman who was one of the first women to go through university and in Scotland and get her degree, and also had her letters in music. So she was talented. I think my reflections on the East Coast and how Pākehā were part of that community, it's very mixed in many ways, because obviously the local iwi would have been feeling colonised yet again. And when I was making some paintings around that quite a long time ago with my grandmother, and I sort of had a title for that show, which was we, meaning Pākehā, we're strangers here in many ways. And so I made a series of paintings based around that. And also the formidable effort of my grandmother to come into a completely different culture and a completely different landscape. So
yes. Well, you a little bit like Jacinda in a way, and myself, in that we all were born into religious families. What was your background there?
Well, it's interesting because my mother was brought up in a family of free thinkers. She came from Wellington, and her parents rejected the heavy religious overtones that they felt blighted much of the 19th century. But my grandmother, the Scottish one, came out, and her husband came from a very Calvinist Scottish Presbyterian background, and it was pretty heavy duty. And in some ways, once they became isolated from the old churches in Scotland, in some way they became even more rigid. And yes, I do. I really enjoyed what Jacinda said about her religious background, and that, yes, was a burden, and if you're wise enough, you can judge it and move away and make a decision about whether you agree with it, which is what I did. But I still think that one of the benefits, or if you can rationalize it with a heavily theological upbringing, is that you learn to think in a very abstract fashion, and you learn to spot cults and problematic areas in life very, very quickly. But it is repressive. It is repressive. There's no question. And it stopped me being an artist and a musician until I managed to work through all of that. And then I went and did my fine arts degree when I was in my 40s, actually. So, yeah.
Now, when you were a bit younger, you went back to Scotland, didn't you?
I went up to the UK. A friend and I, we just frolicked off. We couldn't wait to get out of New Zealand. It felt so repressive, and we were 19, and we saved up and frolicked off to Europe. And I was booked to go to the Università per Stranieri in Italy because I'd fallen in love with art history and did a lot of that at school, and I had a wonderful teacher. But we never had enough funds. And then I went on to the UK and worked there. My sister was already flatting there, so I joined her. And working in Glasgow and the people, they're just extraordinary people. And that's when I really started to notice how about poverty, deprivation, misery, and how the Scots had been so colonised and in many ways destroyed by the colonising power from Westminster. And so I did become politicised because I'd never seen such poverty and such deprivation, I must say. And I worked with extraordinary women in a hospital, and their humour and their courage I just will never forget.
When you came back, did you participate in the Springbok tour protests?
I was very young, and I was pregnant with my first child. We were all quite young, and I had a good friend, and I was so incensed. And as you might well remember, through people you know or through whānau, it was an incredibly divisive time, and we all hated Muldoon so much because New Zealand was repressed socially. And I think that's partly why a lot of people kicked over and went and voted, for the Longi government. We had to get them out, but we didn't bank on all the other changes coming through, and that was really hurtful. But yes, we went in the big, huge march to Eden Park that was run by the Anglican Church and a lot of amazing activists. So we saw the violence down the road, but we didn't actually we weren't on the front line because we were both pregnant, but we felt very strongly. And I just remember the fights in the community and the generational fights more than anything.
Yeah, it affected a lot of families, didn't it? Everyone had different points of view.
It made people stop watching rugby, and, it really was a catalyst for change.
Now, you also got involved in healthcare and the whole smoking, the harvest of death, I suppose you might call it, from the effects of smoking. What was that story all about?
It's really odd how it happened. I'm not even quite sure how I ended up there, but I was invited by a doctor of mine, actually, to go on to the executive of ASH because they needed lots and lots of activists. And so I joined the executive of ASH, and I was on it for 10 years, and I met the most extraordinary people. Boyd Swinburne was on it then. He was also in the Smoke Free Coalition. We appointed a really outstanding new director, Trish Fraser, who is a lovely woman and a long-time friend. Helen Clark was the patron. No, sorry, Helen Clark was the politician. And as she said, she put her political career back by years by really advocating for smoke-free New Zealand. So her courage is amazing. And I remember them being incredible. This was before she became Prime Minister. Incredibly impressed with her intelligence and her commitment. It was just amazing. We used to get death threats. The tobacco industry are criminals, there's no question. And the excitement of getting through those big pieces of legislation was probably one of the highlights, I think, of my life. And as a result, what's happening now is actually more than heartbreaking. But what I particularly remember was the testimonies of tangata whenua, of amazing activists there, and Moana Maniapoto came onto the executive, and there were other amazing executive members. But the stories where they then in the, I think it was the 90s, they were talking about that they were going to have no grandparents left alive. And that was a fact because they were all dying so young, and the addiction was actively pushed by the tobacco industry towards blue-collar workers and Indigenous groups. So one of my better moments, and this involved my daughter, was we set up a sting operation at a dairy. And I know it's not a popular thing to do, but we had to make our point to say that, selling cigarettes to underage children, and at that stage cigarettes were cheaper than a packet of crisps. So, and we did that. But I remember the aggression when we presented our evidence at the select committee from the tobacco industry, who came and actually heavied us in a very physical and emotional way when we came out. So, yep, it's a very real threat.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you had done a BA honours degree in art.
Yes.
And you were in your 40s by that time.
42.
What was that like, being an adult student?
It was interesting, but I come from such a large family. I've got 6 brothers, and a lot of them are younger than me. And I've got 52 first cousins, and I've got 37 first cousins who are male on the McPherson side. And I think you just made room, in a big family, you just make room. So you're never particularly surprised by anything, to be honest. And my children, who were, sort of from 8 till 18, they actually love to see their mother going back to study. And in fact, my youngest son, who lives in Tokyo, he said that it made him work harder when he saw me studying. So I found that actually a really interesting reflection. He wasn't feeling neglected. He actually was feeling, celebrated. So, yeah. It was 4 years
That's awesome.
of really hard work.
4 years of hard work. And where did it lead you to?
It just led me to getting a studio. It led me to a bit of poverty. It led me to frustration. It led me to rage about the art scene. But it's still, what it does is it makes you find yourself. And it's amazing the skills we learned in a BFA, in that we had to do 4 years of business and marketing. So, it gives you a lot of skills. You run your own little business. Not, it's hit and miss, let's face it. The art world is a shocker. But your life is enriched. And for me, whenever you think that you can't, that everything's just too much, or if you lose everything or whatever happens, I think in a metaphorical way that you've always got that creativity, and it will save you, I think.
Now, you're helping other people learn a bit about art, isn't that right?
Yep.
You're a teacher?
I've been teaching adult students for a long time, actually, and a couple of them have gone on to, starting as adults, a couple of them have gone on to be immensely successful, and went on to do postgraduate degrees, which, to be honest, I can't afford to do my MFA because it costs so much. And you don't always need to, but yeah, they've gone on to exhibit, and 1 or 2 of them I hear on the radio, and that's really thrilling for me. I really love that, and I'm continually teaching at the moment. My next set of classes starts on Monday, and it'll be a nice group of 10 over at the Orake Community Centre, which is a beautiful
That's wicked.
Yeah. Come and join
Excellent.
us. My carpets are the cheapest in Auckland.
Now, speaking of Auckland, you lived in central Auckland for quite a while, and
Yeah.
you've sort of seen things, particularly under John Key, there was this emergence of poverty on the streets. This affected you politically, didn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it was shocking. We used to be I was in tears often walking from my studio home up through Albert Park, at the misery. And I remember one night, it was pouring with rain. The central library is where a lot of our homeless whānau gather. And there was he was an elderly Pākehā guy. He had obviously had a bit of a stroke. He was beautifully spoken, well dressed, and he was sitting there on the coldest, freezingest, wet night. And I was talking to him, and I was trying to get him to get into, if I could call an ambulance to send him to the hospital. And he said he'd gone to the hospital, but they had sent him home. But he didn't have a home. And we're talking about people who've dedicated their lives to this country. And actually, sadly, we're back at it again now. So there's an encampment outside the Central Library, and there are homeless people again, whereas for quite a few years, from about 2017, I felt like we were getting on top of it. The beautiful thing about living in the city is most of us accept the aberrations of people living in the city, and we just see them as part of our community. And there is a fabulous community in the city centre, I have to say. Some very, very good people.
Yeah. Now, you also became quite grassroots as a activist and a volunteer for the Labour Party. Can you tell us a bit more about that work and what you learned about the Labour Party as a volunteer worker?
Look, yeah, it's fantastic. You meet the most amazing people, and if you join a political party that's as diverse and with the values that the Labour Party has, and there are other parties out there with good values, it's you just come across the most incredible people who've lived huge lives, but humbly give their time and energy to trying to keep New Zealand and keep making it a great place to live in a decent and humane society. All political parties can be complicated organisms, but if you accept that and that keep your sense of humour and accept that your role is not to be the most important person, but to be the most humble person. And so we've just had an amazing series of women's hui over the last year where huge amounts of policy have been written. And I think it's something that people who aren't actually involved in a political party, they don't realise that there has to be work done. The grassroots in Labour write the policy, and you can have quite a lot of power and say in the direction of that party. It's, when a party's in government, sometimes that can slip a bit because of the nature of the parliamentary system. But essentially, we rely on people to be committed. So, yes.
I see you quite often helping others online to be a little bit more educated about the processes that Labour undertakes to form policy and some of the issues around things like the timing of when they release their policies and some of these debates that sometimes surface around leadership in the Labour Party. Do you like to comment a little bit more about what that feels like?
Yes, I will. I think, and I can be such a gobby know-all too, and it doesn't come across very well. A lot of the stuff I say does have a hint of humour, but I also get quite angry with the Tories, and I sort of have decided I don't care what they think, and so, the F word, they kind of deserve it in a way because they're so nasty to our communities. But anyway, I'm not excusing myself, and it's not classy, but that's me. But yeah, I think until I joined back into the party sort of quite a few years ago, I kind of had forgotten that everything has to be a process. Everyone has to engage themselves with the party, and that looking in from the outside, yes, it is very frustrating, but it's all about strategy, and it's all about holding the values of your party. Otherwise, if everyone has a point of view about whether they like someone or whether someone's perfect, but in the end, you want someone that is reliable, trustworthy. I mean, yeah, I think I do remember going up to support Jacinda she was having a meeting at St Kevin's Arcade, and it was in the 2014 election, and it was it can be so tough being a candidate and campaigning, and I remember sitting there and just held her hand, and she, it was rough, and she wanted the best for New Zealand, and as do our other Labour and progressive candidates, but it's brutal. And so I think people do need to support their candidates and understand, yeah.
Now, if you could say a few words about the current government and your impressions of them, maybe a few sentences, how would you sum them up and what you've seen so far?
It's a horror show. It's absolutely. I knew it was going to be bad because it's always bad with the national government, but this is just like next level. And I was just talking to an old friend today over in Dominion Road, where I go and do some Pilates to keep my body and soul together. But we were just like, can we believe this? Can we believe it? And then we thought, you know what? We should have believed it because it's everywhere. But we just didn't think that we'd be inflicted with a government that is so badly led for a country that's so badly led. And I don't really know how to deal with it properly. I do get very angry, and the pay equity issue is just an extraordinary. I don't know. It's like a nightmare, really, when you have politicians saying that, oh yes, they supported it and they were all congratulating, and in 2020 when the legislation finally went through, and here we go. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's outrageous, isn't it?
It is outrageous. It makes me angry.
It's a theft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more the attitude too. It's like, okay, you can get away with a lot in politics if you actually take the time to take people with you on that journey, and even their own people, but this is the most deceitful effort yet. So
now I heard a whisper that one of your daughters had a little hand in helping to set up the People's Select Committee. Are you able to comment on that at all?
Well, Anna's part of her role as part of, supporting that kaupapa. I can't say too much, but she was on the Pay Equity Task Force, and before that, pay equity was a specialty of hers at the Ministry for Women. But the Pay Equity Task Force, as everyone knows, was completely disbanded, and she was part of a group of women, and they were amazing. And the leadership, Amy Ross, who spoke on the radio, she was the leader, and my daughter learnt a lot from her too. And the amount of work gone into that by everyone, unions, stakeholders, even businesses, is it's just an insane waste of money besides anything else, which they keep bleating on about in the government. But the amount of money wasted and evidence thrown in the toilet is pretty disturbing. But anyway, it's lovely to see Marilyn and those amazing women step up, and I encourage everyone to either turn up to the first one in person or follow it online or send in their submissions. So
Yeah, because there's going to be submissions and Zoom type interactions where people
yeah,
can
it's
raise
going
their
to be
voices.
great. I think it's going to
Because
rattle.
yeah, I think it's absolutely going to allow the voice of all New Zealanders to speak, the ones that this
Absolutely.
government didn't want to speak, that tried to shut our voices down. And
Yes.
it's also going to help form policy for political parties going into the next election. You know, all that evidence and all that
Yes.
information that,
Yeah.
you know, is sitting there, but this government didn't care about. Hey, Marjorie, I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit special. If
Yeah.
you tilted your phone to one side, is there a painting that you'd like to show us?
Yeah. You can see there. It's a large painting. It's about 1200 by 1,000 millimeters across. It was part of an exhibition that I had in 2019, and it was painted as a riposte to the darkness that we'd been through under years and years of, very, very selfish government. And I just felt like lilac, of course, is the colour that denotes women's suffrage. Not that I actually chose it with that, but it just seemed to fit. I liked the colour anyway. And then I just thought that darkness is always like a vast curtain and it's sitting there. But I finally felt that when Labour got back in and the Greens and we had some progress, that the lilac, the force of women and Jacinda was sort of pushing that curtain up. And I did a whole series of pretty political paintings, to be honest, and that shows some dealing with climate change, and some with homelessness. So I had some big panels. And I also did put in, before I even I was active about Gaza, but I was really moved by that right of return situation where the Israelis murdered so many. And but all those little paintings sold, and I'd put them behind stained glass and painted these images underneath. So there was a series of smaller works, and I haven't got those because people have got them. But so yeah, it was my way of expressing myself, and it's really hard to do that in straight out figurative work, but colour and surface and shape coming. A lot of my shapes are taken from my life drawings, and yeah, so I just set forth and made those works. So that one is quite special. I called it Lilac Putsch. Hopefully one day someone will buy it and then I can get a new laptop.
Now, do you also have a painting of, is it your grandmother or great grandmother in a
Yes, I
basket?
do. I've got my mum down here, which she's still a work in progress.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
My mum died last year, and she was a remarkable woman in that she had 10 children, two died, and she was a farmer's wife, worked really, really hard. It was tough. And she lived to 98. So it's not true that your nerves will kill you. They actually keep you alive, because my mother was the most nervy person I knew. So that was mum. Here's my Scottish grandmother. And it's not literal, I've got her in this peculiar, and it's on a fresco surface, which I painted on quite a bit and invented for myself to make it work. So I'd pour the surface like new concrete and then sand it a bit, and then I'd actually work on it with gouache and watercolors and acrylics. So, and you can see right down to the bottom where the abstraction fits in. There's some
Yeah,
curves
that's
there.
awesome.
And I've
Yeah.
called it, and I took it from a Jan Kemp poem who I really loved her work. And I remember John Campbell interviewing her, and she came to my exhibition of that work, and it was like she stretched to shore and lay before. That was a line from it. So it was a kind of homage to those pioneering women who ended up being colonisers, but, we have to figure that one out. I was lucky
Yeah.
I had some amazing tangata whenua primary school teachers in Gisborne at Mangapapa, and they taught us a lot. And we had more immersion in Maori culture then when I was at school, at primary school, than I think happened for a long time afterwards.
Well, Marjorie, that's been really interesting for everybody. I mean, it's a real good insight for us all to see who we're talking to every day on G News. I do actually have one final question to ask you, a final question to ask you, and that is if you'd like to say a few words to the G News audience out there after all these years of posting together with a lot of them, what would you have to say to them all?
Oh, I just say I love them all. I think there's some incredibly intelligent and, perspicacious people that comment on your site, G, and they're all fabulous. And also I'm very moved by people's comments when they put personal comments up about how they're feeling and how life is affecting them. And what I really love, and this kind of puts the light, all the whinging about social media, I actually think that a lot of people would be in a far worse situation if they didn't have these really wonderful groups that they can feel loved and cared by, and people get in touch with each other. I can tell when others are struggling. And I loved it when you talked about your teeth, because I have to have a plate with a toothpick broken. And it drives me mad. I can't speak properly. So,
Oh, yeah, no, I went through about 3 months of being Mr. Gummy, and it's quite funny.
Though, don't you?
Yeah, I kind of forgot about myself and forgot that I looked so funny for a while. But I was just glad that at the moment they seem to work.
It's so stressful, the whole tooth thing, isn't it? And we really have to get free dental care for a certain amount for the year. But it is nutty. But I appreciate all of your commenters, and I do like it when someone gets dispatched for coming in and talking shit and causing trouble. But I do have to apologise to anyone if I've been misconstrued or if I've been too snappish with them and made comments that have been misunderstood, because I know that I do that. And I also have a terrible habit of making typos and then correcting them. I got a bit better at that because I stopped being in such a hurry, because I'm always in a hurry. And
I'm the same. I make typos every day. Sometimes I don't correct them.
I wasn't even correcting them. And then also this really inane habit that I have of writing like 3 comments in a row as if I'm in a conversation. But forgive me, because that's part of being of an enormous family where you have 10 conversations going at once. So...
Well, Marjorie, I just want to thank you for coming on G News and participating in a Get to Know You podcast. It's been really, really interesting. And stay on the line.
Okay.
And we'd love to have you back again, and I look forward to doing some more comments with you soon.
If you want to come and see my studio, it's 323 Queen Street, and just message me in the comments. And you're welcome.
323 Queen Street, Marjorie's studio.
It's the School Union building. So feel free to get in touch. And our studio's leak. We're always threatened with being thrown out. They keep trying to put the rent up, and we go, oh no, bugger off. And then but we're the most reliable. There's a whole floor of us artists up here, and we have funny little rooms. But I've been here for over 20 years.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Thanks, Marjorie.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, G.